It began with a transmission, faint, broken, almost impossible to hear. Somewhere deep in the Mojave Desert, an old U.S. Geological survey station had picked it up in the middle of the night. A steady pulse, like a heartbeat, repeating every 11 seconds. The technician on duty, Lydia Crane, thought it was just interference. Maybe a private radio tower or military chatter bouncing off the dunes. But then the sound shifted. It became a pattern, rhythmic, almost deliberate. She frowned. It wasn't Morse code. It was older, slower, almost human. When she played it back through the monitor, a whisper followed between the pulses. It was impossible to mistake. Someone was speaking. "Don't dig." The message cut out. The coordinates traced to an empty stretch of sand. No roads, no settlements, no known installations. Just 100 miles of shifting dunes and a single dried riverbed called Devil's Channel by morning. A research team had been dispatched. They thought it was a glitch. They were wrong. The team consisted of 4 people: Lydia Crane, Dr. Marcus Hall, geologist Eva Dorn, and a young intern named Peter. They left at dawn, driving deep into the desert in 2 battered jeeps. By midday, the heat was unbearable. The air shimmered with mirages, and the horizon rippled like boiling water. But the coordinates guided them further until they reached a place where the ground suddenly changed. The sand was darker here, almost gray and smooth, like glass melted and reformed. The Geiger counter flickered once, then died completely. "What happened here?" Peter asked. Eva knelt and brushed the surface with her hand. "It's not natural," she whispered. "It's fused." Then they found the pit, a shallow depression, no wider than a small crater, filled with the same strange, glassy material. At its center, half buried, was something that looked like metal, curved, ancient, and scorched black-docked. Dr. Hall grinned. "Meteorite, maybe." But Lydia's stomach turned. The metal wasn't from space. She could see faint markings along its edge, symbols scratched deep, half-melted, but unmistakable. Not human. They set up camp at the edge of the crater. By sunset, the desert had turned cold, the kind of cold that bites through clothes and skin. Lydia couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, the wind would carry a sound, not quite a howl, not quite a voice, but something in between. She sat by the radio, replaying the old transmission again and again. Between the static, she heard it again, faint, distant, as if the signal wasn't coming from the equipment at all, but from beneath them. She woke Dr. Hall. "The signal's local," she said. "It's coming from under the crater." Before he could respond, Peter screamed. They ran to his tent and found him pointing toward the dunes. A figure stood there, tall, thin, motionless. No features, no light, just a shape. When Lydia blinked, it was gone. They waited until dawn to move, but none of them slept. And when the sun rose, they found footprints around the crater, too large, too deep, circling the camp in perfect silence.
By morning, the desert was silent again, too silent. No wind, no birds, not even the distant hum of insects. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath. Dr. Hall and Eva began to work on the crater, setting up ground-penetrating radar. The device hummed softly, scanning the surface beneath the fused sand. Lydia watched the monitor, her eyes narrowing as the shapes began to appear. At first, she thought it was just rock. Then the outline sharpened. Long corridors, circular rooms, and something that looked like a staircase. Underground structure, Eva whispered. At least 60 feet deep. Dr. Hall smiled like a man discovering a new world. "Get the drills. We're going down." By noon, they had opened a hole large enough for one person to enter. The smell that rose from below wasn't dust or decay. It was metallic, sharp, almost electrical. Peter lowered a light. The beam disappeared after 10 feet, swallowed by the darkness. "It's hollow," he said. Then the radio crackled. For the first time in hours, the signal returned. Steady, rhythmic, whispering through the static. "Don't dig." The voice was clearer now, female, desperate. They ignored it.
By late afternoon, they were ready. Lydia went first, sliding down the narrow shaft into darkness. The rope creaked. Sand fell in quiet streams around her helmet light. When her boots touched the ground, she realized it wasn't sand anymore. It was metal, smooth and cold, like steel left in the snow. The chamber was enormous. Black walls curved outward, covered in faint patterns, not carvings, but burn marks, as if something had once been alive here and burned its way out. Ava's voice came over the radio. "You're at 40 feet. What do you see?" Lydia turned slowly. In the center of the chamber was a stone, dark gray, half-cracked, and glowing faintly from within. It pulsed once, twice, in rhythm with her heartbeat. "I think it's alive," she whispered. Something shifted in the corner of the chamber, a shape moving against the light. She swung her torch. Nothing there. Then her headset screamed with static. The voice came again, only this time it was screaming. "You shouldn't have come here." The line went dead. Lydia scrambled back up the rope, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. By the time she reached the surface, the sun had dipped low, bleeding red across the dunes. Her face was pale. "There's something alive down there," she gasped. Dr. Hall only smiled. "Good. That means it's worth studying." They argued until nightfall, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The ground beneath the crater began to hum, a deep vibration that made their tents tremble. The instruments lit up, needles spiking violently. Peter backed away, eyes wide. "It's moving." The glassy sand cracked open, releasing a burst of air so cold it turned their breath to frost. A pale light rose from the pit, not fire, not electricity, but something in between, twisting upward like a living thing. And beneath that light, something vast began to stir. The hum became a roar. The desert itself seemed to breathe. Whatever had been buried under Devil's Channel was awake. The next morning, the crater was no longer still. The fused sand around it had fractured into wide veins that pulsed faintly under the sunlight, glowing white for a second and then fading, like veins under translucent skin. Lydia didn't want to go near it, but Dr. Hall was already lowering himself down the rope again, muttering about discovery and history. The rest of them followed reluctantly. The chamber had changed overnight. The walls, once solid, now throbbed with a faint rhythm. Symbols that had been scorched and dead the day before now shimmered with an oily black light. Eva raised her camera, but the device crackled, screen distorting. "Something's interfering with electronics," she murmured. Dr. Hall ignored her. He approached the pulsing stone in the center of the room, only now it wasn't a stone. The cracks had widened, and something like liquid shadow seeped from within, crawling across the floor in slow tendrils. "Do you see that?" Peter whispered. It was then that they noticed the smell, not of rot or decay, but ozone, like lightning trapped underground. Then the radio came alive again, hissing violently, before a voice whispered through, "You've set it free." The lights died. When the lamps came back on, Dr. Hall was gone. Lydia spun around, calling his name, but her voice vanished into the echoing dark. There was no sign of struggle, no sound, just the faint hum of that black liquid, pulsing in the cracks of the chamber. Ava's flashlight swept across the wall and froze. There, smeared in dark streaks, were handprints, dozens of them, some small, some impossibly large, all pressed deep into the metal as if it had softened under great heat. Peter backed away. "We have to leave," he stammered. Now, they turned toward the rope, but it was gone, melted into the wall. A low sound filled the air. Not a growl, not a voice, something deeper, like the rumble of shifting stone miles beneath their feet. The chamber began to tremble. The glow from the cracks grew brighter, and a shape started to emerge, a towering outline of something that didn't fit the human mind. Limbs that bent the wrong way, faces overlapping like a mirage, a form that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. Lydia's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't look away. "You woke it," the voice whispered inside her head. "Now it remembers." The floor split open. Sand and metal erupted upward, throwing Lydia and the others against the wall. She hit hard. The breath knocked from her chest. Through the haze, she saw Eva trying to crawl toward the fissure, but the black liquid reached her first. It wrapped around her leg like smoke, pulling her back. Her scream echoed through the chamber, then stopped abruptly as she vanished into the dark. Lydia grabbed Peter's hand and ran. There was no plan, only the primal instinct to flee. A narrow gap had opened in the far wall, leading into a slanted tunnel. They stumbled through it, choking on dust and heat. The rumble of movement following behind them. When they finally burst back into the open air, night had fallen. The desert sky was red, not from the sunset, but from something glowing beneath the sand. The dunes shifted like waves, rolling and breaking as if something massive was moving beneath them. Peter fell to his knees, sobbing. "It's under everything," he said. "The whole desert." Lydia stared toward the horizon, where the ground continued to ripple and hum. And then, faintly through the wind, she heard that voice again. "Don't dig." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. By midnight, the desert was alive. The wind screamed across the dunes, carrying with it streaks of lightning that crawled along the horizon like veins of fire. Lydia and Peter huddled beside the ruined jeeps, their faces pale beneath the flashes of light every few seconds. The ground beneath them pulsed, not from thunder, but from something deeper, something breathing. The equipment inside the jeep flickered to life by itself. The old radio crackled, switching through static until a voice broke through. "You can't contain it." Peter grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" Static swallowed the answer, replaced by the same heartbeat-like rhythm they'd first heard at the research station. Slow, methodical, alive. Lydia looked up. The sky above them was changing, clouds forming in perfect spirals, the stars vanishing one by one. The storm wasn't natural. It was being drawn toward the crater, and from that center, the light began to rise again, brighter now, bleeding through the fog and dust until the night looked like a sunrise made of fire. The air itself trembled. Whatever was beneath the sand had reached the surface. They ran. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, but the light followed, growing taller, wider, until it seemed to fill the entire sky. Each step sank deeper into the sand, as if the ground itself were softening. Peter stopped suddenly, gasping. "Lydia, look." Far ahead, the dunes had begun to move. At first, it looked like wind shifting the surface, but then the sand rose in columns, twisting into shapes. Dozens of them, figures, human shapes, made entirely of sand and light, walking slowly toward the crater. Their movements were unsteady, jerky, as if they were being pulled by invisible strings. Lydia whispered, "They're not people." The nearest figure turned its head. Its face was smooth, featureless, but when it opened its mouth, the sound that came out was unmistakable. "Don't dig." Each word was echoed by the others, until the desert itself seemed to chant it. "Don't dig. Don't dig. Don't dig." Peter covered his ears, shouting, "Make it stop." The ground split beneath them. Light shot upward, blinding and pure. When Lydia opened her eyes again, Peter was gone. Only the echo of his scream remained, swallowed by the desert wind.
Lydia was alone now. The storm had calmed, but the world was not quiet. The dunes moved in slow waves, glowing faintly with each pulse from below. She could feel it under her feet, the rhythm, the heartbeat, vast and endless. She wandered toward the crater, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. Her mind was fogged, her body numb. At the edge, she stopped. The pit was gone. In its place stretched a vast spiral, etched into the sand, black symbols forming a perfect circle, miles wide. At its center, something was emerging. A hand, not flesh, not stone, something between both, covered in dust and light. It reached toward the sky, moving slowly, deliberately, as if waking from an endless dream. Lydia fell to her knees, trembling. "What are you?" she whispered. The voice came not from around her, but inside her mind. "We were here before the sand, before the stars. You only remembered us when you dug too deep." She tried to run, but her legs no longer obeyed. The light swelled, consuming everything in white fire. The desert roared, a sound like the ocean and a scream at once. And then there was nothing. Only silence.
3 days after the storm, a search team from the nearby outpost arrived at the coordinates Lydia had last transmitted. All they found were the remains of 2 jeeps, both half buried in sand, their metal frames warped as if from extreme heat. The desert was unnaturally still. Not even the wind dared to move. Sergeant Callum stepped out of the transport, pulling his scarf tight. No tracks, no prints. It's like they vanished into glass. The radio operator called out, "Sir, there's a signal coming through, very weak." Callum frowned. "From where?" "Directly beneath us." They followed the sound to a small crater, not natural, but circular, perfect, as if cut by something impossibly precise. At its center lay a radio transmitter, still blinking. It was half melted, half buried. Callum bent to pick it up. The static shifted then, just for a moment. A voice whispered through the crackling noise. "It's awake." The sergeant froze. "Say again," but the voice was gone. The radio went dead. When they looked back toward their transport, one of the men was missing. They returned to base at dusk. The storm had followed them, not visible, but felt. The air was heavy, the radios flickering with bursts of static every few minutes. In the communications room, Callum laid out what little they had recovered. A few melted pieces of equipment, a shattered camera lens, and Lydia's notebook. Its pages were half-burned, the writing disjointed. But one line had been repeated dozens of times. It was never dead. The desert remembers. When the technicians examined the radio again, they noticed something strange. The device emitted a faint pulse, not random, but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. They connected it to the base monitors, converting the frequency into audio. The sound filled the room, deep, slow, endless. And then, underneath the pulse, came another voice, faint, distorted, but human. We are not gone. We are beneath. Every screen in the control room flickered. For an instant, the feed from an external camera showed movement, the sand dunes outside the base rippling in unison, as though something massive was moving beneath them. The image cut to black. Weeks later, the base was abandoned. Satellite scans showed the entire region slowly shifting, dunes forming, unnatural spirals visible only from above. No sign of the team, no sign of Lydia, no trace of Peter, but the recordings remained. One of them, labeled Desert_Transmission_05, was later recovered by a private research company. The file begins with static, then Lydia's voice, weak and trembling. If anyone finds this, don't go looking. It's awake now. It doesn't sleep. It's waiting. There's silence after that, until a faint rumble begins. It grows louder, deeper, until it shakes the recording itself. Then, just before the tape cuts out, another voice replaces hers, deeper, layered, ancient. We were here before the sand. The file ends there, and though no one knows what became of that desert, pilots who fly over it still report the same strange occurrence. Their compasses spin wildly, and from far below, through the static of the radio, they hear a faint, steady heartbeat.